Buck Farmer is back, and as a big fan of beards, I'm a big fan of this move. Is the bullpen set? We'll answer that question and more on today's Aloha Live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. He's Jeff Carr, and we love baseball. We love the Cincinnati Reds. We have taken our love for the game, our love for the Reds, and we have turned that into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's podcast, Buck Farmer is back. The bearded one returns, and we're going to tell you why this is not necessarily the cool move that everybody's making it out to be. This is actually a lot better than you might think. We're also going to take a look at the question, are the Reds done now? Was this the last move? Does this complete the pitching picture? And then, of course, we're going to put you in the driver's seat. We're going to take your questions. We're going to take your comments, because that is our favorite part of the live shows here on Friday. Before we get into any of that, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. And where we are going to get started today, Jeff, is the bearded wonder, the guy that makes you a little jealous every morning when you're looking at your luscious beard in the mirror. It's Buck Farmer. Buck Farmer has returned to the fold, and I just want to jump on this right away. I want to say I think this is a great move for the Reds bullpen, because Buck Farmer is not being brought back to be the high leverage closer part B, the high leverage partner to Alexis Diaz. That's not going to be his role. He profiles to be much more of a sixth inning guy, seventh inning guy, earlier in the game guy. And I think that is a great lane for Buck Farmer, because, he's coming off a season where the Reds used him. He was one of the highest used arms out of the bullpen. And, he's pitched that load before. I'm not worried about him recovering from that. So I like this signing.
Yeah, and, we can neither confirm nor deny that he was turned down for the role of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, but the beard has remained throughout his entire career, and he has pitched fantastic, I think, last season. Now, you look at the 4.2 ERA, and you say, fantastic? What are you talking about fantastic with that kind of ERA? There were a number of games where he came in and he shut the door. Remember, a relief pitcher's ERA is the most fickle thing and very impossible to really evaluate a relief pitcher on that stat, because you can have a 6-7 game streak of not allowing a run, and then if you come in and you blow up and you allow 3 or 4 runs, that ERA shoots up immediately, and it's not indicative of what his entire body of work was. Buck Farmer was a very reliable relief pitcher for the Reds last year, and yes, he was used the second most amount on the team. In fact, if you look at the number of appearances, it's Ian Gibaut at 74, and then Alexis Diaz and Buck Farmer tied at 71. These guys pitched a ton. His workload's going to be cut back a little bit this year. I think he's going to kind of be that stopgap. If you've got a pitcher who might be, he pitched 5 good innings, but he threw a lot of pitches, or if he's struggling there in the 5th inning, you can bring him in to finish out the inning, and then you bring in another guy. Like, he's going to kind of be the emergency middle of the game guy that you don't have to worry about, oh man, we used Buck Farmer. That's going to kill the bullpen for the rest of the series. And I love the deal that we got him on, because Steve, everydayers will remember, we kind of broke down some of the Reds who were going into free agency and what Spot Track had their estimated contract at being. Spot Track had Buck Farmer at $5 million and change. The Reds literally got him for half of that. And actually, he was even more than 50% off, but at a $2.25 million contract. So I love this move, as small as it may seem to a lot of fans.
I love it when Nick Krall signs a guy on double coupon day. It just makes things fantastic. No, I like I said, Jeff, I really like this move. The thing about this move, when you start to look now at what it does in the bullpen, the question really becomes, is Buck Farmer the final piece in this bullpen? I'm not sure that he is, but you can see why people are instantly drawn to that, because you look at what the roles may be. You would think that now you've got Ian Jabot and Buck Farmer that would be slated to pitch earlier in the games. You've got Sam Mull, who will be your lefty go-to guy. Then you start getting, later into the game, and you start looking to Pagan, you start looking to Diaz, and the roles they're kind of defining themselves. I think. I don't know that there's a lot more room for somebody in this bullpen, unless it's a guy like Clase that we talked about earlier this week. That's just a game changer kind of guy. I don't think they're going to go out and get any more above average pitchers. If they're going to make another change to this bullpen, it's going to be for a stud.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, unless they go get that stud, I don't know who breaks through this group. Let's talk about this for a minute, because the bullpen's going to have 7 guys in it. The way that the roster breaks down now with 26 players and you're limited to 13 pitchers, the Reds are going to carry 13 pitchers. So they're going to have 5 starters, and they're going to have 8 bullpen guys. Yeah, how about I count right? But still,
you continue to try to do math on this show.
Look, I'm a podcaster, not a math teacher. So I talk about baseball, and they put the stats on the screen for me. I don't have to add them up. But, when it comes to these 8 guys, like, I'm looking at, obviously, Alexis Diaz, Lucas Sims, Sam Mull, Ian Jabot, now Buck Farmer. You've got 5 guys right off the bat that deserve to be there. If TJ Antone's healthy, he's going to be in it too. So you already have 6 spots taken up, and you're talking about only 2 spots left for guys like Alex Young, Fernando Cruz. I will stand on a table for the rest of this offseason and say that Fernando Cruz absolutely deserves to be a lock in this bullpen and not a guy that has to compete for a spot, because I thought he pitched well last year. But you have Fernando Cruz, you have there, and I'm blanking on a few names to kind of pull up the roster there, but I know that there are so many different guys that we saw a lot of last year, and there's going to be 1 or 2 of them that don't make the opening day roster as it is right now.
You're right. When you're looking at that roster, Jeff, I mean, it's Alexis Diaz, it's Ian Jabot, it's Buck Farmer, it's Lucas Sims. Alex Young is still on this team, and he is still on the 40-man. He pitched in 63 games last year. I have to assume they see him as the second lefty in the bullpen right now. With this Buck Farmer signing, with Buck Farmer around, they're at the 13 pitchers. So a move for a Clase, a move for anybody else in this bullpen means you have to decide which guy's not making this bullpen now. And as much as we bagged on guys like Alex Young, 3.86 ERA, 63 games, 53 and 2/3 innings pitched. I mean, we never were inspired by his pitching, but it wasn't horrible. There were a lot of guys that pitched last season that were worse than Alex Young. So for me, again, it's going to have to be a press conference kind of signing. It's going to be a guy that they want to come hold up a jersey and take pictures with, a Class A type guy. Otherwise, I think, basically the bullpen is what the bullpen is going to be. And I think it's improved. And it just now becomes a question of who your starting 5 are going to be and who starts the season in AAA Louisville.
Yeah, I honestly think the only way that you're really adding to this bullpen is if you make that Shane Bieber and Emmanuel Clase trade that we talked about earlier on this week. I'd love to see that. That would be absolutely amazing. But other than that, I think the bullpen is what it is, and I'm still excited about it. This bullpen was good last year. This bullpen was overused last year and really hit a wall at the end of the season. But for the most part, this bullpen kept the Reds in the season that they were able to put together. And I think that, bringing back Buck Farmer just underscores how well this bullpen worked together. I'm going to try and run it back mostly, with Emilio Pagan in tow and probably at times Nick Martinez and some other guys in there as well. But I love this move as under the radar, and really it's not even under the radar, as small as the move may seem to some. I think that this is a good one. But like you mentioned, are the Reds done? Does this preclude them from making any more moves? We're going to talk about that coming up next. Before we talk about that, though, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is FanDuel. FanDuel is offering this amazing promotion right now as we're going through the stretch run of the NFL season. There's only 2 regular season weeks left. This year is just blown by. It's unbelievable. And you can get in on the action now at FanDuel.com/lockedon. And check out this promo offer. Your first $5 winning moneyline bet is going to get you $150 in bonus bets with that. It's a kind of odds that you will never see on a money line. Like if you bet $5 on a money line, you win $150. You must be betting for, I don't know, like talking about probably Ricky Karcher to throw an immaculate inning. I bet that's probably what the odds would have to be on that one. But if you want to check it out today, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. They've got all kinds of great lines and spreads and player props, over-unders, and things like that when it comes to the NFL, the NBA, college basketball. Plus, they've got MLB futures as well. Talked about this before. The Reds are at plus 450 to win the NL Central. Don't necessarily believe that adding Buck Farmer is going to move that line at all, but I think that it's going to continue to add value to it. So you should jump in on that line right now. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and take advantage of the promotional offer of $5 winning moneyline bet, getting you $150 for new users. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Thanks as always for making Locked On Reds your first listen every single day. And thanks for being a part of this Aloha Live Friday edition of the podcast. We love coming to you live, talking Reds baseball with you live. We encourage you, if you have not already done so, be active in the comments section. Give us your questions, give us your comments. Let me know, about how awesome my shirt looks and, the chest hair and all that stuff. I know a lot of people really love to comment on that. So,
on behalf of all of our viewers, thank you for using one more button today. I just want to thank you on behalf of the viewers.
It hurt to button this other one. Anyway, you can check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 live streaming channel on YouTube. It's the first ever national sports streaming channel. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Today, and you can get all of the biggest news from our local experts like me and Steve. And then we've got our national shows and things like that. Check it out today. Locked On Sports Today. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Steve, this is the last episode of the year, barring, and by the way, I probably just asked, Nick Krall's about to ask me.
Now we're doing a New Year's Eve.
Yeah, it's going to be like the
live.
Bieber Class A trade or something's going to go down. But barring that, this will be our last episode of the year. So thank you, everyone, that made Locked On Reds part of your day, part of your year, whatever part of the year you tuned in to us. Really appreciate everybody. It does it. We do this for you. We love talking Reds, and usually we just be talking Reds with each other, but we want to talk Reds with you as well. So that's why we love doing these Aloha Live Fridays. And before we really jump back into like the comments and the questions and what people are thinking about, what is
before you transition into are the Reds done yet? I want to get a few final thoughts on this Buck Farmer deal because we didn't touch on this part of it. Okay. And shout out to Wolfpack for kind of bringing this along. I'm going to use his comments to prime this up if I can get my clicker to work. Wolfpack says Buck Farmer was amazing, especially when you consider how hard the Reds worked him. He put in some serious innings. He follows that up by saying, I'm surprised they didn't try to lock him up for a couple years at that price. And Randy chimed in, followed up with, I'm kind of shocked Farmer didn't get a better offer from another team. I am too. I am actually a little surprised at where this deal landed, Jeff. And I wonder if it was a hometown, I want to be in Cincinnati type of contract. I'm more interested not so much in the average value. You and I have talked about this a lot versus number of years. I wouldn't have mind seeing this be a 2-year deal with maybe even a 3rd-year option to lock Farmer up just a little bit longer.
I would agree with that. I think that he showed a lot last season, and to kind of underscore the fickleness of ERAs and stuff like that, if you go and you look at the splits for Buck Farmer last season by month, the month of May, he had an ERA of 1.5. Now, every other month of the season, you're going to see an ERA of like 4 something, but it was the month of May that he really just shut down everybody and he had, I think it was like 13 or 14 appearances in that month. But I don't believe there was a singular month that he had less than 11 appearances. That just tells you how much he pitched. And for a relief pitcher, that is a lot of work. And the performances that he was able to bring on a regular basis, and this is something we're going to do as we start to break down players coming up towards spring training and things like that. I want to look at, especially for relief pitchers, what were some clutch spots, and what were some, maybe they blew up a little bit, just to kind of give people some context, because even Alexis Diaz had a couple of blow-ups, and because of those, some certain statistics that people love to evaluate a player based solely on that number tend to get skewed a little bit.
All right, I didn't mean to hijack you. I just wanted to touch on that for a second, because I feel like it's important to talk about. I think we really got a great pitcher at a discount, and that's not happening this offseason. I mean, thankfully, apparently, the Dodgers did not have Buck Farmer's phone number. I guess that's the bottom. That's the bottom line. All right, here's the question, Jeff. Are the Reds done now? I hinted at this a little bit there in the first segment, and you could kind of see, you can look at this pitching staff now and see that from a Nick Krall standpoint, it could be complete.
Yeah, because and I saw comments on this earlier in the comment list. This definitely pushes Nick Martinez into a favorite to be a rotation spot. I definitely think that was what they signed him to do.
Well, Nick Krall said that. I mean,
right.
As much. He said that they're looking at Nick Martinez to be a starting pitcher.
I think both Nick Martinez and Nick Krall, I about said just Nick, but there's two Nicks involved here. I think both Nicks would be disappointed if he ended up in the bullpen, because I think they want him to be one of the rotation pieces. I don't think this stops them from adding another one, though, especially if it's that impact move, if it's the Bieber in the Class A, if somehow they're able to talk the White Sox down from their insane perch of the price that they've set on Dylan Cease, or maybe they are able to sneak in and sign like a Jordan Montgomery. I did see that. I think the Red Sox are kind of out on Jordan Montgomery now, so you can at least mark one of the teams off the list that you would have expected to sign him. So I still think that Nick Krall wants to add another rotation piece. He sees this roster like we see it. I don't think he's looking at it through Reds colored glasses and saying that they're done. They're officially a playoff team right now. I think you add that starting pitcher, you can start to talk that way. But right now, there's still like that little bit of, okay, they're right on the cusp. They definitely could be a playoff team. But as much as an optimist as I am, I'm not taking that to the bank just yet. And I think Nick Krall is going to make that move.
Well, what tells me that they're at least still, participating in the process is all this back and forth that's come out between the White Sox and the Reds. Those have all been leaks to the media from sources within both clubs, because there's been some active negotiations going on, and those active negotiations have happened well after they signed Nick Martinez. So the Reds are still open to the idea of adding a pitcher, but I think you're right. It's going to be, if there's another move to be made, it's like I was saying there in the first segment, Jeff, it's not going to be for another average to above average pitcher. It's going to be somebody that they think is a true needle mover, a true press conference kind of deal. And we haven't had a true press conference kind of deal in a while.
Right.
I think the Reds are due for one. I would like to see that press conferse, but
I know they had one with Jamer Candelario, but it's still kind of like, I know he was a top 15 free agent, but we're looking at the big name, like the guy that as soon as he signs, you're like, man, I kind of want to get his jersey, like that kind of guy.
Or for in our case, go to the press conference. I would like to see that kind of a move. And when you start to look at this team now, both from the position player side of things and from the pitching side of things, there are no longer any obvious moves. There's some wish list moves now. We still wish for that power hitting right-handed bat for the outfield. That may not happen at this point now.
Did you see the recent rumors that your buddy Teoscar's been contacted by the Dodgers?
No. They're faking you out, Teoscar. Call Nick. Give him a call. There's that move. There's this type of trade, Bieber, Class A, that kind of move. Right. But I guess I'm more in the camp of they're probably done. I know that's not the popular answer. And then that leads us back around to, is that enough? Are we disappointed if they're done now, Jeff?
I'd say I give the offseason a solid B- if this is all they end up doing. I'd still say I'm not like ecstatic with all these moves because I do want them to sign that big time starting pitcher. I'll tell you what this does. And this is exactly what Nick Krall wanted to do. Before New Year's, he is sitting in a position where he doesn't have to be hasty. He doesn't have to go out and make a rash move because he has made these other moves within the margins. And as much as, we kind of talk, we really think they need a starting pitcher, and we keep hearing the Cincinnati Reds have signed not a starting pitcher. And we for some reason, our minds are like conditioned to be like, well, why are they doing that? It's because Nick Krall knows he's basically getting all of his other shopping done. It's like, whenever you go and you get all your friends' gifts and your family's gifts, and then you wait till the end to get your wife's gift or, whatever that ends up being. That's kind of where Nick Krall is at this point. And I think that this is the position of power that if you were to ask him how he envisioned the perfect offseason going, I think he's right there in the middle of it. And I think that that's only going to continue. There's probably another move left in him, but he doesn't have to make that move. And that's exactly the way he wants it.
I think for me, if I'm doing this on paper before we play a game in 2024, grade the offseason opening day edition, I would say I'd give them a C+ because I've said all along that I wanted two of the three things that I thought were major needs. And I feel like they have done a good job with the bullpen. I feel like by adding Pagan, by having Nick Martinez on this staff. And I know maybe a starter, but if he ends up in this bullpen, he's a good addition to the bullpen. I feel like they addressed that. Starting pitcher? No, not really. Power hitting outfielder? No. So on paper, opening day, it's a C. Now, when we look back at the end of the year, because what we don't know right now is how well Nick Martinez would pitch as a starting pitcher. We don't know what this Candelario signing does as far as the other moves of the guys they got. Is it going to be CES in right field? Is it going to be Noelvi Marte in right field? Is it going to be somebody that we end up being really happy with that performs well? When we look back, we can regrade this thing. But if I'm giving it a grade, like right now, as the team sits, as the roster is constructed, I'm not happy yet. And I would give it C.
Yeah, and I think too the other part of this equation is just how good is Nick Martinez at being a starting pitcher. Like he could really show out, and it'd be like, oh, okay, so that was the move that they were making all along, and we just completely undercut it. It's just I think when we see a guy like that who has pitched both out of the bullpen and in the rotation, we ask ourselves, why wasn't he just in the rotation? And is that a reason to exercise caution with his expectations? Which is kind of where I'm at with it right now. I mean, this kind of also leads me to the reports. There were reports about the Reds being linked to a international pitching prospect, a guy named Yariel Rodriguez. He's coming over from Japan. He actually didn't pitch last year, but he's from Cuba, pitched in Japan for the 2020, 2021, and 2022 season. Yeah, he really traveled a lot to do that. But he mostly pitches a relief pitcher. So I think what happened was the Reds kicked the tires on him, figured out they weren't really that into it, or maybe there was a really competitive bidding market for him, and he's a very big question mark if you pencil him as a starter. And so they're just like, let's go shore up the bullpen and get Buck Farmer, and then we can kind of make a move from there. So I don't necessarily know that specific rumor, if anybody was curious about Yariel Rodriguez, I don't think that's going to end up happening. But I do think that the Reds moved based on how they felt with that interaction.
Yeah, that's probably a good take on it. So let's do this, Jeff. I think it's time to put the viewers in control of the machine. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back from that, we're going to let you drive the ship. We're going to do that right after this. You can follow us in between episodes on all of the socials, Twitter X. Jeff wants to be an X-Man anyway, so here we go. You can follow Jeff over there at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs. You can follow me at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs, and you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. Also, don't forget to join us over on our Discord community. We got a lot of great Reds talk over there. We got a lot of channels for other things too. Got a lane for the Bengals, got a channel for that. We got gaming, we got Immaculate Grid, we got Off Topic, we got all the things. So come join us on our Discord server because we want to talk baseball with you. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure that you bookmark the website InsideTheReds.com. Jeff's doing some great work over there. Is kind of the lead writer. James Rapine is our editor, and he's doing a lot of writing over there. We've got Rick Uccino, we've got Audie Elmore. I'm chiming in from time to time. Lots of great coverage of the Reds in written form. Make sure you have bookmarked that site today, and you can read what a lot of these folks have to say about the Reds, as well as listen to us talk about them here on the Locked On Reds podcast. All right, Jeff, let's get into the questions and the comments here, because that's what drives this thing, and that's why we love doing this. I want to start with something, though, because I got beat up yesterday. I got hammered. I got in the comment section on my Clayton Kershaw take. I know Clayton Kershaw hurt his back last year. I don't care. I know Clayton Kershaw is saying, I don't know if I'm going to pitch, and maybe I just want to go pitch back in Texas. And he's saying all the things. It's all negotiation. And if you plop $70 million on a table in front of him, it's going to make him make up his mind. That's all I'm saying. I'm talking about a bold move. And I use Clayton Kershaw as the example, but don't get lost in the name. Focus on what I'm asking the Reds to do. I'm asking the Reds to make a big, out of character, bold move for a guy that inspires fear in the opponent when they're standing in the batter's box. That's the move I'm really talking about. I use Kershaw as the example of that.
I will say, to the counterpoint, there's been some numbers, especially on Baseball Savant, that kind of point to him really declining last year, even with the good ERA and stuff like that. He had some bad expected numbers. His expected batting average jumped by 20 points year over year. His expected slugging jumped by almost 90 points year over year. I see where you're coming from, and it would definitely be a press conference, go buy his jersey signing. It would also kind of be one of those things that you're like, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I just think that there's a lot of hoops to jump through with Kershaw that there's not with other pitchers. And I still think he wants to be a Dodger. I still think everything that he is saying points to him going back to LA, but we'll see. I've been wrong before.
Well, boy, have no. All right, let's start here. Let's take this one from Grant. This is a fun way to start this off, Jeff. What is one fun, bold, borderline, outrageous prediction you have for the Reds? Grant says that Ellie joins the 40-70 club with Acuna next year, or this coming year, 2024.
Mark Grant down for that. I like that one. Really bold. So bold, outrageous. So we're not saying like it's kind of bold, but it probably could happen. So bold, outrageous. I'm going to say that Hunter Green finishes in the top 3 of the Cy Young.
Okay.
Okay, so bold and outrageous. I don't think that it's likely to happen, but I do think he's going to take that step forward that we all keep saying. It feels like every year he shows us little tiny bits, and then he has other bits that are just horrible. I think that he starts to cut out the horrible starts that he has. I think that his bad starts kind of start to look like mediocre to okay starts, and then he still has those good starts. So his numbers really start to jump up this year. And I think that, I mean, if he can get a handle on that changeup, or if he can get a handle on the spinning fastball that moves a different way from his four-seamer, we could really see him take that leap. So I think that's going to be my outrageous prediction. He finishes in the top 3 of NL Cy Young voting.
All right. Bold. All right. Tyler Stevenson is going to hit 40. No, wait. I did that one already. I got to find something.
Echo.
I got to find something else. You know, I think for me, my bold prediction is there will be no sophomore slumps among the rookie position players. I think everyone will finish with better statistics in 2024 than they had in 2023. That is my bold prediction. No one slumps, everybody improves, and we get to go to a World Series parade. You're absolutely correct.
Jeez. Man, I gotta hit the FanDuel right now. Here we go. No sophomore slumps. That would be fantastic.
Sean says, Steve, you mentioned 2 to 3 moves will make you happy. Doesn't the J move cause Steer, power hitting outfielder, to move more permanently to the outfield and check 2 of 3? No, that's what I'm saying. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out. That's what they're saying. But, I was already counting Steer mostly as an outfielder. I still wanted them to go get at the very least, a right-handed power hitting platoon partner for Will Benson, because I still think they need a right-handed power bat out there, not counting Steer. I was already looking at him as part of that group. So for me, I needed something more. Now, again, that's just grading it today, if the season started today. There is going to come a time where we got to look at this thing in hindsight and see, the moves that we couldn't see, the thoughts that we didn't know Nick Krall was having as he was doing these things, and grade how they worked out. But just grading how they're done, I'm still a little underwhelmed, to be honest. And that doesn't mean that I think the Reds are going to be bad. It doesn't mean that I think they won't have success in 2024. I really wanted to see a little bit more. Now, I'm saying all that, and we're not even to January 1st yet. So to Jeff's point there in the last segment, there's still plenty of time. We don't know what Nick has up his sleeve. So, when we get closer to opening day, when we're doing our, opening day preview episode there, Jeff, I think when we do the grades, then they could very well be different. I'm just kind of looking at it as what's on paper before me right now.
Yeah, and I think too, there's probably going to be more than even opening day that we've got to give for some of these to work out, because there will be some guy, and that's why it's an outrageously bold prediction that there won't be any sophomore slumps, because there's probably going to be, and things are going to have to move around, and how the Reds can move around. I still think that this roster is the most flexible it's ever been, and that the moves that David Bell can make and the lineup changes that he can make are going from one good option to another good option. It's not going from this guy can't do this, so we have to play this guy. It's now going from, all right, this could work, or this could work in a different way. And I think that is really fun with how this roster is currently set up, and it may continue. The Reds have still not made any of those waiver claims or something like that as spring training goes along, that you'll see, some guy that we've heard of before who's struggled mightily over the last year or so just gets waived, and the Reds are able to pick him up for next to nothing. And how does that guy play? And there's always one guy a year that does that. So I'm interested to see how those moves factor into it, as well as if he makes another big move.
This next one, Jeff, I have not mentioned to you off air or in the rundown or anything on purpose, because I was hoping it would come up in the comments so that we could just do it in real time. And it did. Grant says, after Joey Votto's latest tweet, do you think he comes back to the Reds on a team-friendly deal and retires a Red? Or, I'm going to add to this, or just simply retires? Did you see his latest tweet, Jeff, where basically he was talking about free agency, and I wish I had it in front of me, but in it, he talked about how, part of the comparison is nobody calls you back. And that really caught my attention. I wonder if the market that he hoped was there is not there, and he's driving attention, or it could simply have just been Joey being Joey, right, in his new personality type. But anyway, jump in on what Grant.
The first thing that Joey Votto is honest. So I don't think he tweeted that meaning some sort of veiled, strange ulterior motive. Like, I think he was saying what he was saying. And I think the interesting part about that is, I think if we got a candid answer from him, he would admit that he would have rather done this about 5-6 years ago, because where he is right now in his career, there's far more question marks than there are answers. And if he'd have done this, think about this, the year that he was robbed of the MVP award and was given to Giancarlo Stanton, who then went to the Yankees.
2017.
Yeah. Think about if he was a free agent after that year, he'd have been one of the top 5 available players. And that's not even like the prime of his career. That's still kind of on the downslope. And now he's doing it now, where it's like, wherever he goes, I think it's going to be more of a personality move, or we're adding you to our clubhouse. Like, honestly, I still think, and I not bought into, I think I saw a rumor early in the offseason that maybe San Francisco talked to him or something like that. I still think there are 2 spots for him. It's coming back here or going to Toronto if he's not retiring. I just don't know that coming back here means anything more than a ceremonial retirement move, because the Reds said they don't have at-bats for him. And then they added Jeimer Candelario, so they really don't have at-bats for him. So however they add him, the only way that I see it working out is if they made a trade that did send a major league infielder somewhere else, and then they sign him to fill those at-bats, or they sign him on like a couple of day contract where they have a retirement ceremony. There's like a Joey Votto day and all this other stuff.
All right, let's take one more for the audio feed, Jeff, and then we'll wrap the audio feed and then keep on keeping on with these questions. So last one for the audio only feed. Carrie says she has another prediction. I see Benson breaking out 20 homers. Over under, Jeffrey, 20 homers, Will Benson.
I think he hits more. And the playing time is going to be a factor, but it's not as if he's going to miss a ton because of left-handed pitching. He's still going to come into those games whenever right-handed relievers come in. I think he hits 25. But I am with Carey. I think that he continues to go. He was so good last year, and like looking at like the OPS plus and even the WAR, and just hitting right-handed pitching, his WAR was still one of the top 10 wins above replacement on the team. And I think that that's only going to continue. He's got a lot of talent. The biggest question mark is, will he ever get to show it against left-handed pitching? Does he need to show it against left-handed pitching? Is that even something we're worried about anymore? Because when you can face the majority of the pitchers in Major League Baseball, I don't necessarily know that you need to show it against lefties. So I think that he's going to continue to be a valuable member of this team. I firmly have him above Jake Fraley in the outfield pecking order, so he should get more playing time there. But ultimately, he's got the talent to hit 25, maybe even 30.
Seth says, Will Benson, 2020 candidate for sure. 20, when you're setting an over under, right, it's supposed to give you a little angst about which one you're going to take. And that number 20 actually does give me just a little bit of angst. You're right. Will Benson last season, even with the slow start, even with majority of time only against right-handed pitching, number 9 on the team in WAR with one.
And he was in AAA for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
He missed almost an entire month.
Even with that start. So, if you would force me, I would throw $5 on an over just for fun. I'm not super confident about it, but I would take the over. And that is where we will wrap up the audio feed. Video folks, YouTube, stay here. For the audio folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. The rest of the Q&A will be coming your way as a bonus episode in your feed. Thanks so much for making Locked On Reds your first and second and third and fourth and fifth listens of the day. That is going to do it for 2023 for us, folks. When we're back at you, it will be 2024, unless, of course, Nick Krall screws us over and makes us work on New Year's Eve, which is his way. So we will see what happens if that goes down. Until then, you can always count on Locked On Reds to be gathering up all of the information, following the rumors, watching the transactions, pulling all that information together and bringing it back right here to keep you locked on Reds every single day. All right, let's dive back into the questions and the comments, Jeff, here on the Aloha Live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. I'm trying to scroll here, gang, and talk at the same time, which is difficult for me. Let's see what this has to hold for us. Bobby says, other than Jonathan India, who would you be the most comfortable with trading this offseason that is expected to be on the roster on opening day? Comfort? We're talking about, no. I don't know that there's anybody I would be comfortable with trading besides Jonathan India. I would be accepting if the return looked good, but Jonathan India, I think, is the one guy that, I wouldn't be happy to see Jonathan go, but I'm kind of expecting it. There's nobody else on the active major league roster that I'm expecting to be dealt that I would be comfortable with dealing. I think everybody that's on this active roster right now is going to be a stud.
Yeah, and I think too the question kind of underlies a couple of different things, like who would actually not necessarily hurt, but who would you be a little bit kind of leery of dealing, but you're kind of okay with it? Because the players that you're okay with dealing are guys like Barrero or, people that you're not expecting to get a lot of playing time. I think if you're picking of the people that you expect to get a lot of playing time, I'd probably say Jake Fraley, but even then he had some nice moments last year that I think will continue. Maybe and this one's kind of tough because depends on what you get back, and you're opening up a spot that you really don't have a ready-made replacement for. But based on what baseball trade value says his value is currently at, and what you and I have discussed that we don't necessarily see it getting any higher, I think I could squint and say I think I'd be okay if TJ Friedl is involved in a trade. But who's playing center field if you do that? That's the big question mark there. But I think you and I both agree that if you were to include him in a trade right now, you're probably trading him at the highest point that his value will ever be at.
You heard it right here, folks. Jeff wants to trade TJ Friedl. TJ Friedel's on the block. I won't even hashtag that one. That was no. You know what, Jeff? You're probably right. You talk about a buy low, sell high scenario if you were to package Friedl, but I don't think they're gonna do that. But no. You're right. I want to go to this one. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about this guy, but you're the ground ball advocator, so. So Buckeye says Stroman is a ground ball pitcher and could play at Great American Ballpark and overcome the outfield defense, basically, is what Buckeye's trying to say here. What do you think about Stroman? We really haven't spent much time talking about him at all.
No, and his profile is one that I would welcome as far as a starting pitcher goes. The only concern with him, and it's a minor concern, it's not anything I think that would preclude the Reds from going after him, is that most people who report on Marcus Stroman say that he's not exactly the biggest team guy. And our position is that we've always said this locker room can just about absorb any personality and really make it part of the team. But I kind of wonder a little bit about a guy like Marcus Stroman, who's been there, who's done that, who's been kind of like the guy on a couple of different franchises now. What does that personality mix? What's that do to the Reds clubhouse? That might be the consideration why we're not hearing a lot of rumors about the Reds going after him. But again, the organization is pretty tight-lipped. So whenever the move comes, it wouldn't surprise me if it's Marcus Stroman, because that ground ball rate is very tantalizing at a place like Great American. And we've seen some other moves that the Reds have made of guys that are more fly ball oriented than ground ball oriented. So I'd love to see that type of move, but the personality questions sort of are in the back of my mind if you make that move.
I wonder if Stroman is in that category you have talked about, where it's not so much about the value, the annual value of his contract. Spot Trek has him market value $15.6 million per season. Right. I wonder if it's less about that and more about the years that he is probably going to want. He's 32 years old. He's probably going to want a 4 or 5 year deal. And
probably the last year that he really could get a huge deal.
Exactly. So, and as you have talked about, it doesn't look like Nick Krall really wants to give out those type of deals, that he is more looking to keep money that will come off the books in time to start buying out some arbitration years on all these young players.
I think, and let's put it this way. I think if we were to ask Nick Krall this, I think he would answer this way. Would you rather, and you have to choose one, would you rather give Clayton Kershaw 2 years of $70 million or give Marcus Stroman 5 years of $20 million per? And I think that he would actually pick the Kershaw one.
I do too, because I think you're absolutely onto something with this whole, he wants to keep the money off the books for buying out arbitration, which makes a lot of sense, because I mean, you and I, and we haven't talked about it a lot here recently, but there's probably another contract coming this year before the end of the season that looks a lot like the Hunter Green contract. Which,
and by the way, you mentioned this, there was something that I saw earlier, and let me find it here, because I wanted to ask you this. I think I would be on board for something like this, and I'm trying to find it so that we can give the guy credit, or gal who said it. Here it is. Matthew Nielsen said, should the Reds extend Spencer Steer? And I think that, his personality and his willingness to do whatever the team wants him to do would definitely lean to that being a good idea.
He's probably the second guy on my list right now. I want Matt McClain to be the one that they buy out the arbitration years on. here pretty quick. Now, hey, why not do both? But for me, the pecking order, if they're going to do it, is Matt McLain, Spencer Steer. I don't think we're there yet with Ellie, and I know that people might get me yelled at, but
I don't think that he has to do too much.
We're quite there yet. Yeah, he doesn't. But if I'm ranking them right now, McLain, Steer, De La Cruz. That's the pecking order in buying out the arbitration years.
Let's take this a step further, and I'll ask you, and I'll ask the folks checking us out here on this live edition of the podcast, what you think if the Reds, and this is also a question that I don't know the answer to myself, but if the Reds were to forego adding another starting pitcher, but they sign at least one of these young guys to a long-term deal, would you be as excited or more excited if they did add that pitcher? So would you give the offseason a better grade if they didn't add a pitcher, but they did extend one of their young players?
And the silence is telling. No, you know what? Maybe. I don't know how much of a bump I would give him. I said I give him a C. Does that get him up to a B? Maybe not. I give him a C++. Because that's an important move for the long-term stability of the franchise. However, what I wanted from the offseason was to clearly cement the Cincinnati Reds as the contender to win the Central and be a true playoff challenge for anybody else heading for World Series baseball. So the extension doesn't do that, but it does set up the long-term viability of the franchise. So I'd give him a little credit for that. He gets some extra credit points, bump him up to a very high C, but if he wants that higher letter grade, he needs to make another move. Jeff, I want to circle back to the Joey Votto talk for just a minute because Debbie Brown hooked us up. This is the quote. This is the tweet. If my clicker will work. Let's try again. There we go. This was what Joey Votto tweeted out, Jeff. Being a free agent is like that scene from Gravity where Sandra Bullock detaches from Explorer. You're all alone. No one is answering your calls, and you don't know if you'll get to base. That was the tweet from Joey Votto.
I think you can almost
Joey being Joey.
I think you can almost interpret that as much as he's probably not getting a whole lot of folks that are interested in signing him, as maybe he's not hearing from the Reds either, in that he kind of expected that to be, his safety net, and it's not there like he thought it could be. That's probably a little bit of a pessimistic way to do it, but Joey loves to use social media to kind of take a colloquial way of saying exactly what he's feeling. And I'm sure exactly what he's feeling right now is he thought he'd have a deal.
Are you surprised at how good he is at that? I wish, I'll tell you what, I don't bag a lot on anybody that's been in Cincinnati media or talk bad. I have talked about grumpy old guys behind the mic a couple times, and everybody knows who I mean when I say things like that, and don't go there a whole lot. But in this one instance, I wish Marty Brennaman had been nicer to Joey Votto, and I wish so much that this Joey Votto had been around the whole time and just counteracted all of that negative talk that had gone on. Joey Votto is probably one of the most underappreciated franchise legends I have ever seen. And that's a big part of it. And I just wish this Joey had been around for his entire career. And I know baseball wasn't in that place as much when he started, but man, wouldn't that have been fun, especially in those years where this team was just horrid and we had nothing to really talk about. If Joey had been providing some antics, that had been great.
I've had a theory about social media for a long time, and Joey Votto absolutely supports this theory, is that introverts are far better at social media than extroverts are. Because extroverts just want to get on there and say anything that comes to their mind or talk about anything that happens. And it's not always the case. Like, introverts really think about what they're typing out, think about what they're about to say. And it's always very well planned and well done. And Joey just absolutely nails that. So it's never surprised me that he's been good at this, because I've always known that, his personality would play well to social media.
All right, let's move on to a couple other things. Nick checks in and says that Mighty Matt, shout out to that Cincy Shirts, It's going to be a 30-20 guy and the next captain. Man, I hope so. We talk about this from time to time, Jeff, and I don't know why. I don't understand why the Reds have yet to issue that C again since Barry Larkin. Barry's talked about it. It would not hurt Barry's feelings. I mean, for God's sakes, he talked about giving it to Kyle Farmer. It wouldn't hurt his feelings. And he also said at that time that it's a thing the Reds do. It's not the players. It's the team. And they haven't done it since Barry Larkin. I don't know why Joey Votto never got that. And I feel like he should have somewhere along the way.
Do you think it's a media thing? Like they don't want there to be a focal point at the end of every game? Like, think about at the end of a bad game that the Yankees had, the first person that every reporter went to was Derek Jeter. And maybe they're trying to dissuade that and trying to, steer the media away from being like, this is the guy that you need to hammer, or this is the guy that you need to go to first and foremost at the end of every game. I don't think I think that's probably a big part of it.
That could be right. I'm not sure. But I think the time has come. Let's do it, especially with this young group that is going to be together for a long time. Let's give somebody the C. I want to see it return, at least for a little while. And I would love for it to be Matt McLain. I've said that several times as early as last season, and it was probably a little premature when I said it. But you can see it. You can watch him play. You can watch how he carries himself on the field. And you can see him in that role on the field. You can see him being that guy that pulls everybody together on the infield real quick and like settle down, get it together. You can see him in that role.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Let me ask you this. Does he get the C while Jonathan India is on the roster?
Well, maybe that's the issue. So, yeah, I think he can. I think that Nick Krall has been willing to publicly state time and time again he's listening to offers for India. Oh, I don't really want to trade him, but call me. Those kind of press conferences. I don't think he'd worry at all about hurting Jonathan India's feelings. I could totally see, because there's two things here. There's your on-field captain. There's you give that guy the C. He's the one, and then there's your veteran, for lack of a better way to describe India at this point, that's behind the scenes in the clubhouse, sharing some wisdom, rah-rahing guys up. India can still fill that role. I don't think the C changes that. But when you're talking about a guy that is going to be here, if they give McLain an extension or buy out his arbitration years, I think it would be a perfect time to put the C on his chest.
Yeah, I think that's probably where the timing's going to happen if they do end up doing it. And because I've also heard like some explain it as just like, well, why do you need to name a captain? I'm like, well, that's kind of like a thing. Like other teams do it. I don't know why we don't. And it just, I've heard that explanation as to why the Reds have not named a captain. And it's almost like that. Well, why do you need a captain? It's just like, that's not an explanation. Stop trying to make that like a point. That's not a point.
Ooh, this next one from Lucas, I think, is in your lane, Jeff, because I know you kind of like this guy. Lucas wants your thoughts on Jacob Hurtubise.
I think he could be a late season call up, but he's in that same vein, and he's probably, if I were power ranking the outfielders who could be called up this year, he's behind Blake Dunn. But his profile is very fitting for this team. He's a contact hitter with a lot of speed. I don't necessarily know that the Reds need a lot more power. I like the idea of a guy who can get on base and really run. Like Hurtubise is one of the fastest guys in the organization. So I think that would be a lot of fun, and he could be a dark horse future center fielder candidate. I don't necessarily know that he would hit for enough power to be an everyday player, but he is the kind of guy that would at least be part of a team, could be like a fourth or fifth outfielder, something like that on the roster. I just don't know that we see him this year. I think that it's more likely we see him mostly at AAA this year, and then maybe he's in the mix next year to get a call up.
I have Hurtubise on my 2025 list, Jeff. I think Blake Dunn is your mid to late season. Now, of course, all of this is injury dependent. Like if everyone's healthy and there's no injuries is what I'm talking about here. I see Blake Dunn All-Star break or later, maybe more into September. Remember now with the September call-up rules, it's not like it used to be where you can just bring up everybody that you want to bring up. It's limited. So I could see Blake Dunn as your September call-up cup of coffee guy, kind of like they did with Spencer Steer a couple years back, and take Blake Dunn that way. And then Hurtubise is a spring training invite in 2025 with an opportunity to play his way onto the roster, I think.
Yeah, you only get 2 extra call-ups in the month of September now, so that does make it a little bit harder. So when you say that a guy could be a September call-up, it means a little bit more than it used to in years past. But I think I would kind of be surprised if we see Jacob Hurtubise in the major leagues this year. I think I put him in the category of, if he makes the major leagues, that means that there's been a lot of stuff that's gone wrong with this outfield.
I want to take this comment from Seth because, when we recap the moves that Nick Krall has made, we don't talk about this move, and it's really a much bigger move than it appeared when it got done, I think. Seth says, Luke Maile is also a great clubhouse leader. Absolutely right. When they re-signed Maile, we did talk about it at the time, and I thought this was a huge move for the pitching staff, having that stability back there. They've got both catchers now, know all of the pitchers on this roster. They know their strengths. They know their weaknesses. They're comfortable working with each other. For all of those reasons, I thought he was a great signing. And this, Seth, is another one of the great reasons that this signing was important. It didn't move a needle. It surely didn't warrant the press conference jersey holding that I've been talking about. Right. But this was a very sneaky, quiet, great move for the Reds, just from the stability standpoint, from the continuity standpoint, from, the pitchers being able to continue and pick up when they come to Goodyear right where they left off in their development. I don't think we can say enough how important it was to get Luke Maile back in the fold.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of pitchers that have developed that, he's my favorite catcher mentality with Luke Maile. So that was important for the Reds to not, forget about that and let him go into the open market. I do think that what we saw from him might be like his ceiling this past year, but that's totally okay. I mean, as long as he's, catcher 2 and the Reds aren't relying on him to be catcher 1, then that is how this roster moves perfectly. And I know there's some people that think that he's better than Tyler Stevenson. I do not believe that at all. I think Tyler Stevenson is catcher 1. But if Luke Maile is your catcher 2, he's far better than a lot of catcher 1s out there. So we know what it's like whenever your catcher wait, what did I lose? The catcher continuum is in flux like it was a couple of years ago. So the fact that the Reds have that nailed down and it's stable is a huge point of emphasis for this roster.
Well, and then the spare part signing of Wynn,
right,
who's now at AAA, just in case something goes wonky with the pitchers. I like the group of catchers right now. I think Nick Krall, that's one area we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about, but I think he did a great job there. Kerry checks in and says, if the Reds are desperate for pitching late this year, do you think Rhett Lauder would be ready? Here's the thing. He might be ready. He might be developed more than everybody else. I really don't want them to call him up in 2024. I think there's enough other guys in the pipeline that there's no need to rush it. And with him coming off of arm problems out of college, I would really like to see them take a cautious approach with him, have him on a hard pitch limit, not an innings limit, a pitch limit, and then shut him down when he hits it. And then bring him back in 2025 with a full go competition window if he can get through 2024 uninjured. I think it's too much pressure, too fast, and could have too much potential for future arm problems if you let him try and fight his way to the big leagues in 2024. I would tell him straight out directly, you will not pitch in the major leagues in 2024. These are the goals we want you to accomplish, and we'll talk again in 2025. That's how I'd handle him.
There are a lot of college baseball experts and a lot of draft experts that say that pitchers who come out of Wake Forest are very near, major league ready. And that's why there's been a lot of reporting that he could be available for the Reds and be an option for the Reds this season. There's two things that really depend on that, though. His elbow health, because there were some questions about that as he was drafted, because he might have been dealing with a little bit of something there. And the other thing is the Reds roster and how it moves. The Reds have so many young pitchers that are trying to prove themselves already that adding another one to the list, I think it would definitely take some injuries, which I really hope we don't see. I really hope we're not in the case where, half the rotation is out for most of the year or something like that, because I think that's what would probably trigger it. I think individually he's talented enough that he could be on the major league roster this year, but I think I'm with you there. Like, give him 1 year where he's working his way through. He'll probably start in Chattanooga. I think he's more advanced that he doesn't have to start in Dayton, but I think he'll probably start in Chattanooga, probably pitch in Louisville. And I think that's all he needs to worry about. Like, don't put this on him where he feels like he has to get to the major leagues this year, because he could be a very viable option in 2025, as long as you're not like rushing it, forcing it, and putting too much pressure on him too fast that maybe he crumbles under it. I don't want to see that at all.
All right, let's jump into a couple more fun ones. These usually end up being pretty fun. Alex asks, if you had to bring back one former Reds player to add to this current Reds team to put a lock on them winning the World Series, who would you bring back and why? Very curious of your takes. If are we talking active players or historical players? Because historical players, good God. My answer to the historical, Jeff's going to get mad at me. My answer, because I always go first, my answer is always Frank Robinson. It will always be Frank Robinson. Every question like this, the answer is always Frank Robinson. Historical players. But I want to morph it a little bit, Jeff. Current active players, because the historical guys, this week could be a whole episode. But yeah. active current players that you would want to bring back. And I'm going to go first again. Luis Castillo. I want him back. Let's put him in the rotation. I want to keep the guys we got for him, by the way. I just want Seattle to be like, it's not working out. We're going to treat this like a Rule 5. Here you go. You can have
Try to have your cake and eat it too. I see what you're doing. I think, just for argument's sake, so the current...
I know your answer is Jeff Hoffman. Just get it out of your...
No, it's not. It's not Jeff Hoffman. And I saw a lot of folks that, would say Sonny Gray to this and things like that. I think I would say, man, trying not to pick Luis Castillo is tough. So I think ultimately I'd end up picking Luis Castillo. I still think I'd probably bring back Nick Castellanos. I think this lineup would just be insane with him in it. And you could do the whole thing of, would you rather, hold your opponent to 2 or 3 runs a game, or would you rather score 5 or 6? And you bring him into this lineup, you're scoring 5 or 6 a game. I don't care who you're facing, but that's the counterpoint to Luis Castillo. Luis Castillo is the answer.
Remind me after we're done, Jeff, that there was a comment in the comments that I could do a whole hour of Locked On Reds Blue, the late night edition off of. Remind me.
I don't know if I want to remind you about that now.
Something we didn't talk about earlier, and I saw it in the comments, and there's been way too many for me to go back and find it. But somebody was talking about that they would rather not be the Raleigh Reds this year. They just want to lead games and have early leads and hold them. Yeah. And I wanted to talk about it at the time, and it moved on too fast. But I wanted to circle back to it because that was the Luke Weaver effect, guys. Yeah. A lot of that was the Luke Weaver effect with him not on the team. I mean, how many of his starts? Like, it was like 18 of the 20, whatever. The Reds trailed after the first inning, and they managed to come back in the game. So I think from the point is not lost on me. I too would rather they led early on. And I bring all of this up, Jeff, because, heading into 2024, the consistency of the lineup is going to be an important thing. And we did a whole episode on this where we outlined basically, you can see a scenario where 1 through 6, 1 through 7, as far as the batting order goes. Now, I'm not talking about positions where they're playing defensively, but 1 through 6, 1 through 7 batting order wise could pretty much be the same every day. And guys could just show up at the ballpark and know what they're doing and prepare. And I think that'll go a long way in scoring runs early and often.
Yeah, I kind of find this intriguing because he was a guy that, he had so many of those starts where it was just like, it's not looking good. They're giving up a ton of runs. And then they ended up, there it is. Run support per game. He averaged, when he was a Red, 5 runs a game were scored whenever he started. So that just tells you the baseline that he had. And he had so many games. He left 15 starts. He had 21 starts with the Reds. He had 15 no decisions, which means he either left with a tie or left with the Reds trailing, and they came back and won, and they got him off the loss column. 15 no decisions for Luke Weaver. That's just how crazy that the Rally Reds were, and just improving the starting pitching as a whole. Like, if you're telling me that what the Reds did by adding Nick Martinez is they put Nick Martinez where Luke Weaver should have been, then they've already upgraded the roster pretty well. So I definitely still think that there's more to be done, but that in and of itself is going to be a phenomenal thing. But just think about that. Like, take the 5 runs a game, and this is going back in time because I always think of this guy when I think of run support, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Give 5 runs a game to Aaron Harang. Dude would have won the Cy Young because he would have won 20 games, and that 100%. Was back when winning 20 games meant something, because I'm pretty sure like his run support as a Red was like 3, maybe 3.5 if he was lucky. So 5 runs a game, that's crazy to me.
All right, let's end with this, and we're going to get out of here. We're well over the hour mark now, and there's so many of you watching right now live. Thank you guys so much. Once again, this is our last episode of 2023. I hit on this right before Christmas. And without doing a bunch of number stuff, I just want you guys to know that between 2022 and 2023, you guys doubled in size. There's so many of you guys now, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I love coming back to town and stopping and talking baseball with you. I know Jeff and I are always blown away at the number of folks that end up stopping and talking baseball with us when we're wandering around the banks or wandering around the concourse at Great American. And we truly appreciate you. We do this because you're here and you're listening. And I can't say enough how grateful I am for that heading into 2024. I can't wait to continue to cover this team. Many of you wrote out 2022 with us, and we're here for the excitement in the change in direction in 2023. And we look so forward to what we hope is a playoff run with you guys in 2024. And you know what? I think, Jeff, never mind another one. That's a great spot right there to wrap it up. Give us your Happy New Year thoughts, and let's get out of here.
Yeah, that was something. And just to share a quick story, and it was so funny to me, but got the chance to go to Chicago this past year in May, and I went to a White Sox game, which, by the way, White Sox Stadium, very underrated. You should check it out. I recommend going to a day game, though. That's still a key. But I was on the north side of Chicago, like not 6 blocks from Wrigley Field, and we were at a brewery and sitting there, and our server came up and said, "Do you have a podcast?" And it blew me away that someone knew who I was in Chicago. It trips me out every time anybody comes up and wants to talk Reds with me. I absolutely welcome it, no matter where we are.
Tampa.
It's happened a lot.
Same thing happened to me in Tampa. Yeah.
It's happened multiple times where I've got my mouth full of beer or some sort of food or something like that. So that's always a little embarrassing, but really appreciate it. If you want to ever talk Reds, definitely don't hesitate to come say hello if you see us out and about. But thank you so much for making us part of your day and talking Reds with us. That's where we will wrap it up. Our final episode for the year of 2023. So, as every dad joke's probably going to say, we'll see you in a year. Thanks so much for making Locked On Reds part of your day. See you later.
With your mouth full of beer. That's everyday occurrence.
Yeah.